Cool. So, first of all, thank you. Maybe I'll also start by going through the Menti people's questions briefly, and we'll probably do a fast lightning round later. But somebody asked if this is all real and this sign language class, does it really exist? So yes, this director is Joe Hunting. He's from UK. He spent a good chunk of time in VR chat communities. They're actually connected to WhatsApp, I believe. And they meet a lot, very often, and they had all these different adventures. And I guess as many documentary-style movies get made, this was also shot over several years and then put together into this kind of story of sorts. Did anybody? I actually cried a bit because I watched it at home and it was like serious when the wedding scene was happening. I don't know. Did anybody have any emotions like that? No? Yes? Thank you for admitting. Cool. Okay. So let's maybe start. So Andra is at Tartu Ülikooli meediauuringute professor. Yes.
Correct.
Maybe in English it's professor of media studies in Tartu University. It's corresponding. So I'm assuming you guys. And Ermo is a doctorand, and I should know this better, but he's actually. They have a metaverse cluster called Mint. And he's the collaboration director? Or? Okay. In Tallinn University then. Very cool. So they're supposedly smart people and should have some insight maybe into what we saw today. So I'm wondering maybe we'll start with Andra. Anything you know about this movie, or how in general can you put this into some kind of context where we might be in this future generation of internet versus like what's happening today in a more screen-based consumption?
Yeah, I'm not sure if it's actually working. But maybe.
Is there sound on the right?
Okay. So first of all, thank you for inviting me to experience this movie. This was also the first time for me to see it. I have been studying online communities and internet since 2005,
Wow.
Basically what I see here reflecting in this movie is tons of hopes and dreams people always had about internet and how communication in various online communities would be like. Various hopes and dreams that started to be spread in early 1980s, I would say, but most of them haven't materialized, I would say, as well so far. So it was for me also interesting to see that many things all through the decades have stayed the same, and people still continue to hope that online space would be something that will enable us to explore who we are, to really experiment with our identities, but in the end, it's also very different and difficult to differentiate between what's real and what's virtual, because it will be blended into one in the end, or it hopefully is blended into one.
Do you see what was, just to follow up, what was shown in this movie today? Do you see anything that kind of took a step forward in some of those hopes and dreams since the 80s? Or is it kind of just the same thing, just knowing 3D graphics since, I don't know, playing mods, or I don't know what the 80s reference goes to?
I also have to admit that this is not my real field of research in terms of I'm not studying online virtual games or anything of that kind, but the books that reminded me the most, or I started to think about the most, was Sherry Turkle's 1984 Second Life, or Second Self, it was named, a book which emphasized the dreams that in the virtual world you can be whoever you want to be, and you can experiment with various elements that you cannot experiment so much about in a physical world, and the same dreams get to be spread in social media when it first appeared. but didn't quite materialize. And in other context, another book that this movie reminded me was a book by Laurie Kendall, Hanging Out in Virtual Pub, which was a ethnographic story about an online community just like that. But it was a text-based community and text-based interaction through avatars. And many hopes and dreams from this 2002 book were reflected in this movie for me.
Thank you. And then what were your impressions from the movie, and what you kind of, maybe with your background also, is there something in particular that you can comment on or that you found interesting?
First of all, hi, and thanks for having me. And first thing I want to say is that watching this on 2D screen did injustice to this story, because probably all of us know the feeling of being immersed in the 3D world, and I think the storylines would have been even more powerful for the viewer, even if being the director or from the point of the camera. And by saying that, I also want to add that why it is so important to be immersed into the film to get even more stronger emotions is that there was in the film that the guy said that I'm so glad that I unmuted myself to you. And the first times I experienced this kind of VR chats and the virtual spaces, then also it felt safe to be muted, which means that if we go to the virtual world, we really start to feel the person, the avatar next to us, to be a real person. So, is it possible to see it in 360 as well? Do you know?
I don't think so, actually, but it's a good point. I should ask.
Anyway, I think it was a really good insight and really good interviews with characters.
Cool. Thank you. And then I'm wondering about the. So somebody asked in the audience. I think I got the exact question lost, but basically it was something about, is it for everybody VR? And nowadays as well, you see this kind of generation, like the people that grew up basically as iPad being their first toy, and like that generation is now playing Roblox, I guess, and kind of the world keeps changing as they come of age, and then maybe there are new people born now for whom like it's normal to have a headset on, or at some point it will be that shortly the case, and then the whole culture will kind of change accordingly. Like, I wonder, do you see that the same, that they kind of, it's basically very age group generation based, that older people kind of stick with their Instagrams and Facebooks or whatever, newspapers, and don't really switch that much?
Well, I would say that we will continue to see changes in generational media use, definitely, but those people who have been growing up during the last 3 decades and formed a so-called digital native generation, I cannot see them changing their internet use patterns anytime soon, which means that if they have become used to using these kind of platforms, I would say they continue to be using those also when they are much older, and when they are older adults, they probably can communicate through these platforms with their grandchildren and so forth, because these are the trends we are seeing anyways in the use of social media and so forth. But yeah, I cannot see that this is only for the young people to hang out at least.
Anything you want to comment on? If you do, just jump in.
Yeah, I just want to add that what's really like cool and what we are is enabling that we know is that people like the older generation who probably wouldn't use the VR classes voluntarily, but if they happen to be paralyzed, for example, from neck down, or they can't go outside, they have problem with walking, etc., then they already have this wonderful possibility to escape to nature, even to nature.
That's also, guess we could, it could be a 10-hour discussion. Let's keep it to about 30 minutes. People are asking, and very reasonably, about the bad side of VR, so on health or overstimulation, daily life. There was a smart question about how does it affect divorce rates. Any thoughts there? Like, I think kind of a grounding thought is that any new technology, you know, it gives us new ways to kind of, I don't know how to put this nicely, but you can basically just spend time doing a certain thing because it's really enjoyable and kind of let go of what you really should be doing with your life and with yourself. And I wonder, is it just another one of these new technologies? Like, you know, you shouldn't scroll Facebook or whatever, TikTok nowadays all day. You should do other stuff. You should stop yourself and, you know, do it. So in a way here, you can jump from experience to experience, and you can have this instant, like, basically orgasmatron of like endless, like, cool stuff with people you maybe like. You know, what do you think? Is it like up to people to regulate it? Should there be some regulation? I don't know.
I won't talk about regulations, but what I've
eventually,
learned,
not right away.
yeah, but what I've learned from few studies is that while people are in VR, the power, the brain uses way much more power because it has to observe, like usually 360 degrees around the user, which we usually don't do, and if we do, we instinctively know that. I know that probably there's empty, there's no people there.
No threat.
Yeah, no threat. But in VR, as it is also very colorful, and it's not, as we saw, it's more like a comic or like a computer game. The graphics ain't that real. That means that our brain has to work more to understand what is meant. For example, that piece, what is that? So we have to use way much more brain power to process all that information. And if you go to experience, for example, 15 minutes long VR piece, then you kind of lose the track of time, and it seems to you feel like you've been there more than half an hour. Actually, maybe it's 10 or 15 minutes. So the brain is working way much harder in VR.
Well, as much as I have heard about metaverse, the critics are saying that it will experience similar kind of problems. So we are already experiencing everything related to internet use, in particular issues with hate speech and all the nasty things that online spaces can provide. But also the issues of regulation have already popped up in the context of metaverse. So probably there will be much more discussion in the near future related to these issues, how to solve those.
I've heard also thoughts that, because in a way you can be really anonymous on, like, you know, a Facebook comment thread or wherever, and you can type some really nasty stuff that you would never say to a person to their face, and then if you are together, it's more like real time, synchronous, you have a sensation that you're actually there with real people, which you kind of are, just they're maybe looking different. Then maybe some of the nastiness will kind of not be there. Like, in some ways it might make us more human in communication. I don't know. Any positive hopes?
Yes, one needs to hope.
Yeah, okay. Then, so another thing is, another opinion is that we are in Estonia, there's a lot of like space, forests, like super nice to be. Why would I, you know, disappear into virtual reality? What do you think about that? I mean, obviously if you're in Mumbai or who knows, like in some terrible slum or, and also piggybacking that, do you have, like World of Warcraft was a thing like 10, 15 years ago, I guess over 10. I've heard stories that people who live in some ghetto place, you know, they could be out like doing some horrible things, stealing cars, or they could be playing like WoW. And that was kind of a new, higher quality kind of floor for their life in a way that they could do something horrible. Now they have this cool world they can go to if things are really bad. So I wondered, do you maybe see, it's a mishmash, but like, so first of all, do you see do you agree that in Estonia we are kind of waiting for the augmented reality metaverse to arrive maybe, so we don't need to disappear so much and we just see nice overlays of the one we already enjoy? And second question is, how do you feel about this having a high quality floor to your life if you live in Mumbai in the like a metaverse world?
Well, to me, if I think all kinds of things new related to new technologies and the internet, then when we look at the user side and I'm the person studying users, then also in terms of young people who are said to be very high-tech and digitally native since forever, they actually aren't that active in various virtual worlds like World of Warcraft, for instance, if we talk about Estonian youngsters. So what I have seen through these years doing research on the topic is that Estonia tends to take up all these things new, let's say up to 3 to 4 years later than the rest of the world, when we think of new phenomena appearing to online spaces. So I cannot comment why is that. I haven't found out.
It's so nice here, I guess. Me too.
Maybe, but yeah, probably this metaverse thing will also become much more popular here in a few years' time in comparison to what it is now.
Yeah, I totally agree, and maybe one thing is also that we are small as a country and as a nation, which means that the ones who are really enthusiastic, they go and try those things out, but the majority, if you think about the language, all these spaces are usually English, which means that maybe an 8-year-old would like, but he or she doesn't feel so confident in English. And the other thing is that maybe, I don't know, that's a totally wild guess, maybe it's something related to getting the devices and also the price of them and the internet connection speed people have at home and the way that our families are raised or our children are raised, that you go to school, after school you have a practice, then you go to this and that, so they don't have maybe so much free time to escape into this world. And again, Estonia is a beautiful place, they maybe don't need to escape.
Nice, yes. Then, yeah, so we're kind of getting to time. Is there any topic you'd like to discuss that maybe either from the movie or related?
Well, when I started my own PhD in 2005, I wanted to study how young people present themselves on social media. So how they, everything related to their identity building, and much of this was very gendered. So girls were very sexualized, boys were experimenting with their identities much more, and things like that appeared both through looking at these various communities, but also through interacting with these young people. And to be honest, these are the same things that we see here. Like most of the female characters you see are also very sexualized, with like big breasts and very short skirts and all that. So again, it's a topic of gender identity and the various stereotypes we might have about what it means to be a attractive, good-looking woman, perhaps haven't changed so much, although the platforms have changed. And in terms of masculinities, there is much more variety, and I think it was also visible here in this movie, that there is much more experimenting with your masculine selves. So yeah, I think that was interesting for me.
Thank you. Ermo?
I have two little thoughts. First is that as we saw, then this kind of spaces we've had these kind of spaces on 2D screens already. For example, chat rooms. Then we got video call opportunities via Skype, it's the nature of people that we actually want to communicate with another person. We want to talk to them, and that film was all about. And it was kind of funny to see how they interacted with each other as avatars, because actually they are still alone in their homes, wearing the bodysuits that are tracking their movements. And if they touch the other person or avatar, then actually they don't get the feedback. So once we get the haptic costumes more on market and affordable, then I think the experience will be even more powerful.
Yeah, I should also say that VR Chat is the kind of online world platform where you can experiment most with avatars. That's kind of their whole thing. That's why, like, a lot of this is also requiring development work to make, your different parts of the body move, or there are like all kinds of crazy costumes which are not possible in most worlds. So therefore, also like they're constrained by the system, but also it's probably the most innovative of the different systems there are. Okay, and I basically have the last question. This is from the audience, and it's, who will you be in a VR world and why?
That's a tough one.
I already have, but not in the VR chat, but it was some other world, and somehow it's most easiest for me is if you know the TV show, really old one, Saved by the Bell.
Yes.
Then there was this cool guy, Säks.
You would be Säks?
Yeah. No. Not Säks more. He was the main guy.
There was Slate and Säks and Screech.
Yes. Then yes, Säks Morris. And luckily for me, usually they have the body parts to build that kind of character. So I'm Säks Morris usually.
Nice.
I need to confess I haven't experienced any of these metaverse games or spaces myself. My only experience was when attending a conference of internet researchers during the COVID times. We also wanted to have more interaction that was impossible otherwise. So we also had some kind of a avatar community where we were able to chat with ourselves, and at time I tried to look as my real self, so I had like red hair and tried to make use of the same kind of body parts as I usually have. So yeah, nothing original here.
Thank you. I'll answer as well since I was sort of put it out there. I think for people that know me already, then yeah, either it doesn't matter, so I put on something stupid and funny, or it's something that it's more professional setting, you want it to kind of remind of you, or at least be like the best thing you can do with this outdoor system. I do think, and I haven't really done anything with it, but I've been to like a few festivals where you can kind of play, I guess, with it in real life, like Burning Man, and there I know that if you dress something, your evening can be totally different because you're kind of feeling that. It's like a role playing in a way, and doing that probably in VR would also be interesting. But also it needs to be like a space with normal people and stuff, like, because I've been to VR Chat like a few years ago. We got like a tour, been to that bar as well that they had in the movie, and half the people were like wearing some mini skirts, and they were actually guys. They were like these manga Japanese girls, so it was an interesting crowd, but probably not the one you want to be like serious with. So, but I do think we're getting there, because this movie is a pretty good testament actually of how there are communities, we just don't know about them, and there's real people living real lives and being real serious about it. In the metaverse definition is a bit looser, but in an online world, let's say. So thank you very much, dear panelists, Andra, Ermo. Thank you everybody who came to see the movie. We have probably some more drinks and stuff left. You're welcome to play Beat Saber, get a little award if you win your class, and just hang out, chat, enjoy the evening. It's really hot in here. Sorry about that. Maybe go by the window. And catch you around Startup Day in town. So thank you.